Today we're going to review dilutions. I'm going to actually go through a dilution series, a 1 to 2 dilution series, and we're going to make them here with the tubes, and then we're going to go to the board and talk about some of the math. So I have in front of me deionized water. I don't know if you can see there, it actually is labeled DH2O. In this series, I'm using deionized water as my diluent. Always make sure you know what your protocol calls for, because deionized water will actually lyse any cells that you may be looking for. So if you're doing a dilution and you need to look for cells, you want to be using saline or some other substance. You do not want to be doing water. In today's demonstration, I am using water. In here, I've got a tube marked green. Now you notice everything I have is labeled. Never have anything in a rack that's not labeled, because if I get called away and somebody walks up here and they don't know what's going on, they need to know what's happening for safety reasons. So this is green. This is just green water. I just chose green water today to show you the nice gradient of color we'll hopefully get. This could be plasma, this could be serum, this could be cells, this could be any number of things, but today we're just going to be diluting out the green. Today I'm using my micropipetter. This is our Eppendorf micropipetter. This one is good from 100 to 1,000 microliters. Remember, 1,000 microliters is 1 mil. This one's currently set at 800, so I'm gonna roll it up. Remember, this one is just a dial. Some of them you have the little button to push before you dial, but this one is just the dial. I'm gonna take it up to 1,000. 1,000 microliters is the same as 1 mil. Whoop, went a little far, but let's go back. Boom, there we are. There's our 1,000 microliters. Now remember, this pipette has the two stops. The first stop for drawing up and the second one for blowing out. So I'm gonna get my pipette and I'm gonna put my deionized water here, and I'm going to, don't forget, you have to pre-moisten the pipette tip. And you can see I'm doing this nice and carefully, nice and slow. I don't know if you can see the pipette tip in there. When you actually get this far, it's nice and slow. We don't want to go super fast. Okay, so I've wetted a few times. I'm gonna go in, go nice and slow up. Take it to my tube number 1 and give it the little air blowout. Remember, these are blowouts. Nice and slow. Blow it out. Nice and slow. Blow it out. So my diluent, I'm going ahead and putting my diluent in each of the tubes. And you notice I'm not wiping the outside of this because it's just water. I'm not carrying over anything on the outside. There's no big drips on the outside. You really want to wipe the tip if there end up being big drips on the outside of it that could affect your measuring. Okay, so now this pipette tip is going to go over here into my box because it's pointy. It's pointy, it's sharp. It's not a true sharp, but it's a sharp enough where we're going to be respectful to our custodial staff. So get a new pipette tip, and I'm going to go up and down a couple times in my green. And again, I still am set on 1 mil, 1,000 microliters. Okay, so first stop, suck it up, take it over, and I'm going to discard, and I just did the blowout. If you heard the blowout at the end, and I'm gonna get rid of that tip. I'm gonna get a new tip, and I'm gonna go up and down. I'm gonna mix this tube a few times. By mixing the tube a few times, I am also pre-wetting my pipette tip. Okay, so now it's nice and empty. Now I can use this one to go into the next one because it's what I've used in there. I don't wanna use the first one because it might have some of the stronger concentration on the inside. So I'm going to go into my tube number 1. I'm going to pull up and transfer 1 cc into my tube number 2 that already has the cc in it. Okay, nice slow. Is my one up down? Okay, and then this last one, I just get a new tip just to mix it. So you can see by looking at these how we have this nice gradient of dark blue all the way down to light blue. So now I'm going to walk over to the board and we're going to talk about these dilutions. Okay, so now we're at the board and we're going to talk about what we just did in the tubes. I've got it drawn out. I've got my deionized water, I've got my green, and I've got my tubes drawn out. So you can see I've already put my 1 ml of water into each of these tubes. Don't forget, 1 ml is the equivalent of 1,000 microliters. So I went ahead and took the water and I put it into each of the tubes all the way through 7. So then I take my green and I take out 1 ml of the green into the first tube. I mix it really, really well, and then I take 1 ml of the green into the next tube. And then I continue to do that, mix it each step of the way. And I do that each step of the way. I'm going to add my 1 ml. I'm going to mix it, and then I'm going to take away that ml and put it into the next tube. Now, I really wish there was a way for me to make this nice and gradient like you saw in the tubes. Unfortunately, it doesn't work on the whiteboard. But you kind of know what's happening as you're going through these tubes on the whiteboard, what happened to the tubes where they had that nice gradient of dark green to light green. So each of these, because I'm putting 1 ml into 1 ml, these are all 1 to 2 dilutions. Each tube individually is a 1 to 2 dilution of the previous tube. So I took 1 ml of green with 1 ml of water, that's a 1 to 2. Then I took 1 ml of 1 with 1 ml of water, it's a 1 to 2. However, when you're talking about tube dilutions, each time you do it, it multiplies. So the first one is still 1 to 2. However, this one is 1 to 4, 1 to 8, 1 to 16, 1 to 32, 1 to 64, and 1 to 128. Because each time you take the 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 2 times 8 is 16, 16 times 2 is 32, 32 times 2 is 64, 64 times 2 is 128. So the tube dilutions from the very beginning is what we end up with there. When we're talking dilution factor, we're talking the inverse of the tube dilution. So in this case, the dilution factor would be 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and 128. That would be the dilution factor for each of those tubes as you're going through. So when you're trying to calculate a dilution, if you calculate a number out of this tube, whatever the number you calculate, you have to end up multiplying by the dilution factor of 8 because you diluted it out to that point. Now the last thing we want to talk about is the final volume. So you remember when I take that first mill to mill, it's 2 mils, but I take that mill out, right? So because of that, my final volume is only going to be 1 mil. Same thing here, 1 mil, because I carry a mil to tube 3, I carry a mil to tube 4, but then when I get to the last one, I stop. No more comes out. So because no more comes out, this last tube actually has a final volume of 2 mils. It's kind of nice because if we do end up having to go further out, we can go ahead and use that tube and keep going. But all of these have a final volume of 1 mils except for that last one, which has the full 2 mils in it. Hope this helps you understand how we set up these dilutions as we're carrying things over. So let's look at another example of the tube dilutions. So this time I still have my green, I still have my deionized water, but instead of 1 mil for the bottom of each tube, I'm going to go ahead and put 4 mils of water into the bottom of each of my tubes. So there's 4 mils in each of the tubes. Then I'm going to take 2 mils of the green and put it into tube number 1. I'm going to mix it, put 2 mils into tube number 2, mix it, 2 mils into 3, etc., all the way down. So what I'm doing in this situation, I've got 2 mils of the green, I've got 4 mils of the water, so that's going to be 6 mils total. And when I look at the 2 mils, it's going to be a 2 to 6 dilution, which when we reduce it down is a 1 to 3 dilution. So therefore, each of these tubes is going to be a 1 to 3 dilution of the tube before it. So, excuse me, with that, now we have to figure out the tube dilution, because they're each 1/3 individual of the one before it. But instead now we're going to multiply these each by 3. So this is still going to be 1 to the 3rd, but this one now is 1 to 9, 1 to 27, 1 to 81, 1 to 243. Remember, I was taking 3 times 9 to 27, 27 times 3 to 81, 81 times 3 to 243. 243 times 3 is 1 over 729, and the final one is 1 over 2187. So when we're playing with these dilutions out, we go all the way. When we do the 1 to 3 dilutions, you can see how much farther out we get, how much faster we get. So when we look at the dilution factor, it's still the inverse. So in this situation, it's 3, 9, 27, 81, 243, 729, and 2187. Now, in this situation, we're going to look at that final volume. So the final volume in this one, you see we started 2 plus 4 was 6, but then I moved 2 out. So my final volume is going to be 4 mils. It's going to be 4 mils, because again, I have 2 into my 4, which is 6, but then I moved 2 out. So it's going to be 4 mils all the way to the end, because I'm always adding 2 but taking 2 out. Here at the end then, I don't take 2 out, so I put 2 in plus my 4, and I end up with 6. So now, let's take this one step further and look at what a glucose might look like. So now let's go ahead and look at this as a result. So let's say I come over here, and for whatever reason, I'm going to run a glucose. Well, actually, let's start there. I'm going to run a glucose, and for some reason, it wasn't working at 1, 2, but finally on my 3rd reading, I get a result of 15 milligrams per deciliter on this 3rd tube dilution. Well, look down here, the 3rd tube dilution, the dilution factor is 27. So my 3rd tube dilution factor of 27. I had a reading of 15 milligrams per deciliter, and I'm going to take that 15 milligrams per deciliter and multiply it by my dilution factor of 27, and when I do, I get a result of 405 milligrams per deciliter. So I can now report this out as 405 milligrams per deciliter in that tube number 3. We don't have to tell them it was tube number 3 because we corrected already for the dilution of tube number 3 with this dilution factor here of 27. If you have any other questions, make sure to reach out to your instructor.